The Aether's path drifted silently through the vastness of space, a massive intergalactic transport ship designed to carry goods across light years of empty space. Inside, the hum of the engines kept the crew moving, working tirelessly to ensure the journey would go smoothly. However, today something had gone terribly wrong. The main drive core, the heart of the ship, was malfunctioning. On board, Captain Evan Cole, a seasoned human mechanic, walked through the ship's narrow corridors. He was no stranger to trouble, especially when it came to technology. His rugged hands and worn tools had fixed more problems than he could count, and this one seemed like another challenge to tackle. But there was something different about this mission. Something unfamiliar. The Aether's path was under repair by someone else, a highly skilled alien engineer, Gilithra. She wasn't human, and that, in itself, was enough to make Cole uneasy. He had never worked alongside an alien before, especially not one from Chrysix, a planet known for its advanced technology. The Christians were brilliant engineers, but their methods were often so alien that it was hard for humans to understand. When Cole arrived at the engineering bay, he found the alien already hard at work. Gilithra was tall, her pale blue skin glowing faintly under the lights. Her silver hair, long and flowing, was neatly tied back as she worked with delicate alien tools. Her large golden eyes didn't even glance up when Cole entered. She was absorbed in her work, staring intently at the ship's control panel. "Captain Cole," Gilithra said in her calm, almost musical voice, not looking up. "I've been expecting you. The situation with the drive core is more complicated than it seemed." Cole crossed his arms, staring at the alien engineer. "That's why I'm here," he said. "I've been working with engines my entire life. I'll have it fixed in no time." Gilithra raised an eyebrow, still focused on her tools. "Your methods, though effective, are outdated. My calculations suggest we need to adjust the core's stabilization frequency. The solution is not so simple." "Simple or not, it's my job to fix it," Cole replied, a little irritated. "I've been doing this for years. I'm not some rookie." Gilithra finally turned to look at him, her golden eyes narrowing slightly. "I do not doubt your skills, human. However, I study the ship's systems in greater depth than you. The technology here is not built with your kind in mind. Your approach might cause further damage." Cole's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being second-guessed. "We'll see about that," he muttered, stepping up to the control panel. He started running diagnostic checks, his hands moving with practiced ease, adjusting settings and analyzing the ship's data. He could feel Gilithra's eyes on him, judging every move he made. It wasn't something he enjoyed, but he had no choice. They had to work together. Gilithra didn't seem to mind the silence as she continued with her analysis. Her long fingers moved over a touchpad, bringing up a series of graphs and readouts that Cole couldn't quite follow. He watched her work for a moment, realizing that despite their differences, she was intelligent, perhaps even brilliant in her own way. But he wasn't going to let her push him aside. He knew his craft. After several minutes, Gilithra spoke again. "The damage is more extensive than I anticipated. The drive core systems are deeply integrated with the ship's life support systems. If we don't fix this soon, we could risk total system failure." Cole frowned. "I'm not here to argue. Let's just get it fixed." They worked in silence for a few hours, each focused on their own tasks, yet always aware of the other's presence. Cole was frustrated, not just with the situation, but with Gilithra's constant supervision. It felt as if she was doubting him every step of the way, as if she didn't think a human could possibly understand the problem. Eventually, Gilithra broke the silence. "I've designed an alternative solution that might help stabilize the core temporarily. It would require adjusting the power settings to optimize the flow of energy. We can work together on this." Cole hesitated. "Your plan might work," he said slowly, "but I still think we need to make sure we're not just patching things up. I prefer a permanent fix." Gilithra nodded. "I understand. But sometimes, a temporary solution is what we need to buy time until we can implement a more thorough repair." "All right," Cole agreed. "Let's try it." Together, they worked on adjusting the energy flow, Gilithra's advanced tools complementing Cole's practical knowledge. As they worked side by side, something strange started to happen. The tension between them began to fade, just a little. Cole noticed the way Gilithra's eyes softened when she explained her ideas, and he started to appreciate the precision of her methods. She wasn't so different from him after all. They both just wanted to get the job done. By the time they finished, the core's systems were stable, though only for a short while. The ship wouldn't be able to maintain this fix forever, but it would give them the time they needed. Cole wiped the sweat from his brow and let out a deep breath. "Not bad," he said, nodding toward Gilithra. She gave him a rare smile. "Not bad yourself, human." The captain didn't return her smile, but there was a glint of respect in his eyes. They might not be friends, but at least they were partners in this. As they left the engineering bay to report their success, Cole couldn't help but feel a sense of uneasy camaraderie. They were going to have to work together much longer than he had expected. It wasn't going to be easy, but perhaps there was more to this alien engineer than he had thought. The Aether's path drifted through space, its engines humming as it continued on its long journey. The temporary fix they had applied to the drive core had held, but everyone knew it wouldn't last. Cole and Gilithra had to work together again if they were going to prevent the ship from failing completely. Over the next few days, the tension between the two only seemed to grow. Each time they met in the engineering bay, their methods and ideas clashed. Gilithra would present her complex, scientific theories, while Cole would insist on using practical solutions, sometimes old-fashioned methods that worked just as well, if not better. But the alien engineer never seemed to understand. "We must adjust the plasma coils to match the ship's energy signature," Gilithra explained one morning, her golden eyes glowing as she manipulated the controls. Cole glanced at the readout. "That's a lot of extra work for something we don't need right now. A few adjustments here, and we can stabilize the core manually." Gilithra sighed, a sound that almost seemed musical. "You humans always try to take shortcuts. If we don't fix this properly, we'll just be patching the problem over and over." Cole shook his head. "Sometimes a temporary fix is all we need to buy time. We've got the ship moving again, and that's the first step." "I disagree," Gilithra said firmly, turning back to her touchpad. "If you would just allow me to complete the process." Cole raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "I understand your theories, Gilithra, but we need to move fast. There's no time for experiments." Gilithra paused, her fingers hovering over the controls. She had been patient with him until now, but his constant dismissal of her ideas was beginning to wear on her. She knew her species' technology was far more advanced than anything human engineers had ever created. Yet there was something about the way Cole worked that intrigued her. He was pragmatic, not driven by theory alone, but by results. It wasn't always the most elegant approach, but it was effective. Cole was staring at the control panel, clearly frustrated. Gilithra's words had been like a constant hum in the back of his mind, pushing him to go beyond what he knew. Her methods were confusing, too complicated for someone like him who had always relied on practicality. He didn't want to admit it, but he couldn't help but wonder, what if she was right? As if sensing his thoughts, Gilithra turned back to him. "I don't mean to disrespect your skills, Captain Cole. I simply believe there's a better way to fix the ship." Cole took a deep breath, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "It's not about disrespect. It's about getting things done. I don't care about what looks good on paper. I care about results." Gilithra looked at him for a long moment before replying. "I suppose we'll see who's right in the end." The next few hours were tense, filled with silence and the occasional glance exchanged between the two. Cole worked on his approach, adjusting the manual controls while Gilithra continued her own calculations. It was as if they were two people, speaking completely different languages, yet still trying to communicate. When they finally met again in the evening, Neither of them had made much progress. Cole was at a dead end with his methods, and Gilithra's calculations didn't seem to be making any difference either. Both were running out of ideas. "That's it," Cole said suddenly, leaning back against the wall. "We're stuck." Gilithra's golden eyes softened, though her tone remained calm. "We are not stuck, Captain. We simply need to combine our strengths. Your hands-on experience and my theoretical knowledge could work together if you would allow it." Cole glanced at her, surprised by her willingness to compromise. "You mean work together? Really?" Gilithra nodded. "Yes. Perhaps I've been too focused on theory. You've been too focused on practicality. The key is to find a middle ground." Cole stared at her for a moment. It wasn't easy for him to admit, but maybe this was the only way forward. "All right," he said, after a long pause. "Let's give it a try." They began working side by side, combining Cole's practical, hands-on methods with Gilithra's complex, theoretical solutions. She showed him how to adjust the ship's energy flow in a way he had never considered before, while he explained the simpler mechanical steps that might help keep the system stable long enough to make her ideas work. As the hours passed, something changed between them. They began to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. Gilithra realized that Cole's intuition and experience were just as valuable as her own advanced theories. And Cole started to appreciate the depth of Gilithra's knowledge. She wasn't just a brilliant engineer. She was also deeply thoughtful and determined to make the ship work. By the time they finished, both of them were exhausted, but there was a sense of accomplishment in the air. The drive core was stabilized once again, and the ship's systems seemed to be running smoothly. For now. Gilithra looked at Cole, her golden eyes reflecting a mix of respect and appreciation. "It appears we have managed to find a solution after all." Cole smiled, though it was a tired smile. "Yeah, I guess we did." For the first time since they had started working together, there was a sense of mutual respect between them. They still had their differences, but they were no longer enemies. In fact, there was a feeling of quiet camaraderie. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could learn to work together after all. As they walked out of the engineering bay, Cole couldn't help but think that this partnership, strange as it was, might just be the key to saving the Aether's path. Captain Cole was up before dawn, his mind racing over the repairs they had just completed. The drive core was stable for now, but there was a long way to go before they could be sure the ship was truly safe. As he walked down the quiet corridors of the Aether's path, he couldn't help but replay the events of the last few days. Working with Gilithra had been frustrating, yet it had also been strangely satisfying. For the first time, he had worked alongside someone whose ideas were so different from his own, yet they had managed to make it work. The day started like any other, but Cole knew this would be the day they would finally test the repairs. Gilithra had been reviewing the ship's data, making adjustments to her calculations, and now it was time to see if their combined efforts could hold. He found her in the engineering bay, once again at her touchpad, carefully analyzing the ship's systems. Her silver hair was pulled back into a neat braid, and her golden eyes focused intently on the glowing screens in front of her. "Good morning," Cole said, stepping inside. Gilithra didn't look up. "Morning, Captain," she replied, her voice calm. "I've finished recalculating the core's energy flow. If we proceed with the adjustments I've made, the system should run more efficiently." Cole nodded, though he was still skeptical. He wasn't entirely convinced by her theories. "All right, let's see what happens." As they worked together, Cole began to notice something different. Gilithra was no longer the cold, distant engineer she had been at first. She was speaking to him more openly, explaining the steps of her adjustments in a way that made sense. He, in turn, was helping her understand the physical, mechanical side of things, where the tools needed to be, how to handle the power lines. In the past, they had been at odds over every little detail, but now, it felt like they were slowly learning to work in harmony. It wasn't easy. Their methods still clashed at times, and they both had moments of frustration, But something was shifting. "What's the next step?" Cole asked after a while, his brow furrowed as he inspected the data on his own screen. "We need to check the power conduits," Gilethra replied, moving toward a bank of switches. "If they're properly aligned, the core should begin to draw energy from the main reactor without causing any overload." Cole glanced at her, impressed. "You know, you're not as bad at this as I thought." Gilethra gave a small smile, her eyes softening. "You're not as stubborn as I thought, either." There was a brief moment of silence, and for the first time, Cole realized just how much they had grown since they first started. They were no longer just two people working together out of necessity. They were a team, however unlikely that team might seem. And in that moment, the difference in their skills and backgrounds didn't seem as important. They continued their work, checking every connection, every readout. It took time, but eventually, they were ready for the test. "All right," Cole said, standing back and crossing his arms. "Moment of truth." Gilethra nodded, her face serious. Indeed. She keyed in the final sequence, and the two of them watched as the ship's systems came to life. The drive core hummed steadily, its light glowing brighter than it had in days. The energy readings were stable, the flow even. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, the soft beeping of the control panel confirmed what they both had hoped for. "It's working," Cole said quietly, a sense of awe in his voice. "It's actually working." Gilethra stepped closer to the panel, her eyes scanning the data. "It appears that the core is functioning optimally. The stabilization is holding." For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stared at the readout, both feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. They had done it. The repairs had worked. The ship was no longer on the brink of disaster. "That's a win for both of us," Cole said, breaking the silence. He offered Gilethra a rare smile. She nodded in return, her face serious but with a hint of satisfaction. "Yes, it is." As they moved to finish the final checks, Cole couldn't help but think about how much they had accomplished together. Their differences had been clear from the start, but it seemed that, for once, those differences had worked in their favor. Gilethra's advanced theories had helped him see beyond his usual methods, while his practical experience had kept them grounded. The result was something neither of them could have achieved on their own. Before long, the rest of the crew began to filter into the engineering bay, their faces full of relief. The systems were up and running. The danger was past. And while the ship was far from perfect, it was no longer in immediate danger of breaking apart. "Good work, you two," Lieutenant Grayson said, clapping Cole on the back. "You really pulled it off." Cole chuckled, shaking his head. "I'll be the first to admit, I didn't think we could do it. But looks like I was wrong." Gilethra said nothing, but her expression softened as she looked at the crew around them. She didn't need to speak to share her satisfaction. She had seen the result with her own eyes. As the crew celebrated, Cole and Gilethra stood off to the side, quietly reflecting on their work. They had come a long way since their first awkward encounter. The journey ahead would be difficult, but now they were ready. Together, they had taken the first step toward making the Aether's path truly safe again. "We make a good team," Cole said, his voice quieter now. Gilethra's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was no tension between them. Just mutual respect. "Yes, we do." And in that moment, both knew that despite their differences, they had found something valuable in each other. An unlikely, but strong, partnership. The success of the repairs on the Aether's path was only the beginning. While Captain Cole and Gilethra had worked together to stabilize the ship's drive core, they both knew the journey was far from over. The ship still had a long way to go before it reached its destination, and there was no telling what other problems might arise along the way. For the next few days, the ship ran smoothly, and the atmosphere between Cole and Gilethra continued to improve. They had learned to respect each other's skills, and while they didn't always agree on everything, their teamwork had proven effective. They found a balance between Gilithra's advanced theories and Cole's hands-on methods. There was a sense of understanding now, a feeling that they had become something of a team, despite the many differences that still existed between them. But then, as they approached a distant star system, something unexpected happened. The ship's sensors began to flicker, the screens flashing with warnings that neither of them had seen before. Cole was in the engine room when the alarm started. The sound of the sirens echoed through the ship, filling the quiet corridors with a sense of urgency. He rushed to the control panel, his heart racing. "What is it now?" he muttered to himself. Gilithra was already there, her fingers flying over the touchpad. She looked up at him, her golden eyes wide with concern. "There's a massive electromagnetic storm in the path ahead. If we don't take immediate action, the ship's systems could be damaged beyond repair. Can we avoid it?" Cole asked, his voice tense. He was used to dealing with engine troubles, but this was different. This was something he couldn't control. They needed to make a decision fast. Gilithra shook her head. "It's moving too quickly. We'll have to reroute the power to the shields to protect the ship, but we'll need to shut down non-essential systems to conserve energy." Cole frowned. "Shutting down systems? That's going to leave us with almost nothing running. What about life support?" "We'll have to conserve it as much as possible," Gilithra replied, her voice calm but urgent. "If the storm hits us full force, we won't have any other choice." Cole nodded, taking a deep breath. "All right, let's do it. We don't have much time." They worked together quickly, rerouting power, adjusting the ship's energy distribution to focus on the shields and life support. As they worked, Cole couldn't help but notice how smoothly Gilithra moved. She didn't hesitate, didn't second-guess herself. She was quick, efficient, and calm under pressure. Her knowledge of the ship's systems was invaluable. And for a moment, Cole allowed himself to fully appreciate the alien engineer's skills. But even with the power rerouted, the storm was still coming. The ship's systems began to flicker, lights dimming as the power reserves dwindled. There was a sense of tension in the air. They were in danger, and there was no telling how much time they had left. "Shields are at maximum capacity," Gilithra said, her voice steady. "But we won't be able to hold out for long if the storm intensifies." Cole clenched his fists. "We need to hold on, just a little longer." The storm was closing in, its waves of electromagnetic energy crashing into the ship's shields. The Aether's path shuddered, groaning as the shields took the full brunt of the attack. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the lights flickered once more. Cole could feel the tension building inside him. They were so close, just a little longer, and they might survive. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, and the lights went out completely. The entire ship was plunged into darkness. "What happened?" Cole shouted, his voice echoing in the silence. Gilithra was already working, her touchpad glowing faintly in the dark. "The power grid has been damaged. We've lost half of our shield capacity." "Can we fix it?" Cole asked, his voice tight with anxiety. Gilithra nodded. "We can, but it will take time. I need to bypass the damaged circuits." Cole's mind raced. Time was something they didn't have. The storm was still hammering the ship, and the shields were barely holding up. "I'll help," he said, already moving toward the access panel. He knew that working together was the only chance they had. They worked in the dark, the only light coming from Gilithra's touchpad and the occasional spark from the damaged circuits. Cole felt the sweat on his brow as he twisted wires and reconnected circuits, his hands moving quickly but carefully. He couldn't afford any mistakes. Gilithra worked beside him, her fingers moving with precision as she bypassed the damaged systems. She was calm under pressure, something that Cole had come to respect. Her knowledge of the ship's inner workings was impressive, and it became clear that she was the key to fixing the problem. After what felt like an eternity, they managed to restore the ship's power and stabilize the shields. The storm raged outside, but the Aether's path was holding steady. "We did it," Cole said, letting out a long breath of relief. Silithra looked at him, her golden eyes filled with quiet satisfaction. Yes, we did. The storm continued to batter the ship, but for the moment, they were safe. They had survived. And once again, it was thanks to their teamwork. Cole turned to Silithra, a look of appreciation on his face. I guess we make a pretty good team after all. Silithra's lips curled into a small smile. Indeed. I believe we do. For the first time, Cole felt a true sense of gratitude toward his alien colleague. They had faced a life-threatening challenge together and come out victorious. It was clear now that, despite their differences, they were more than just two people working toward the same goal. They were allies. And as the storm raged on outside, Cole knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The Aether's path had survived the storm, but it wasn't unscathed. The damage was not catastrophic, but it was enough to slow them down. Captain Cole and Silithra had worked hard to make sure the ship was functional again, but now, as they looked at the ship's status reports, both knew that the worst might not be over. Cole stood in the command center, staring at the holographic display. He rubbed his eyes, trying to clear the fatigue from his mind. The storm had been intense, and the repairs they had made were only temporary. He needed a more permanent solution. Silithra entered the room quietly, her silver hair glinting in the dim light. She had been in the engineering bay all morning, running diagnostics and trying to figure out how much damage had been done to the ship's power systems. She could tell that Cole was tired, but there was something in his posture that made her pause. You look like you haven't slept in days, she said, her voice soft but concerned. Cole turned to her, a half-smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. I haven't, actually. There's always something more to fix, something else that needs my attention. Silithra regarded him for a moment before speaking again. You know, Captain, it's not just the ship that needs care. You need rest as well. Cole sighed, running a hand through his hair. He appreciated her concern, but it wasn't the time for rest. Not yet. I can't afford to take a break. The ship's got too many issues, and we're not exactly on a leisurely journey here. The crew depends on me to keep things together. Silithra studied him carefully. And who do you depend on, Captain? Who helps you when you are worn down? He didn't answer immediately. In truth, he had always preferred to take on everything himself. He was the leader, after all. But as he looked at Silithra, he realized something. The alien engineer had never hesitated to step in when the situation called for it, and their teamwork had proven more effective than he had expected. I depend on my crew, he said at last, his voice steady. And right now, I depend on you. Silithra's golden eyes softened as she heard his words. It was rare for a leader to admit such things. She had seen many human commanders before, and most were too proud to ask for help. But Cole was different. She saw a man who carried a heavy burden, one that he could not bear alone. We're a team, Captain, she said, her tone firm but kind. And that means we share the load. Cole nodded, grateful for her understanding. I appreciate it, Silithra. They both turned back to the display. The ship had held up well under the storm, but there were still issues to address. The power grid was unstable, the energy reserves were low, and there was a nagging concern in Cole's mind. They were getting closer to their destination, but they needed to fix the ship before they could safely reach it. You're right, Cole said after a moment. I can't do this alone. We need to work together to make sure the Aether's path is in top shape for what's ahead. Silithra nodded. We have a plan, but it will require all of our skills. The shields need to be reinforced, and the power grid must be balanced to ensure stability. I know, Cole replied, a sense of resolve growing in him. Let's get to work then. They spent the rest of the day in the command center, working through the repairs and system updates. Each of them took turns running diagnostics, rerouting power, and reinforcing the ship's hull where needed. It wasn't easy work, but it was necessary. With every adjustment they made, the Aether's path began to feel stronger. As the day wore on, Cole found himself relying on Gilethra more and more. Her understanding of the ship's systems was unlike anything he had ever encountered. She knew exactly how to adjust the ship's energy flow, balance the reactors, and ensure the shields were at their optimal capacity. It wasn't long before Cole realized just how much he had come to trust her. By the time they had finished, the ship was in much better shape. The shields were stronger, the power grid more stable, and the crew was no longer facing the same immediate danger they had been just hours before. As Cole surveyed the progress, he felt a sense of pride. The Aether's path was still far from perfect, but they had managed to make it through yet another challenge, and they had done it together. "I think we've done as much as we can for now," Cole said, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "Let's take a break." Gilethra nodded. "You deserve it." They walked out of the command center together, their steps light despite the weight of the work they had just completed. For the first time in days, Cole felt a small sense of relief. The ship was in better shape, and they were one step closer to their destination. As they made their way to the crew's quarters, Gilethra spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "Captain, I know you carry a heavy burden. But remember, you do not have to bear it alone. We are all in this together." Cole glanced at her, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Thanks, Gilethra. I'll keep that in mind." And for the first time in a long while, Cole allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to carry the weight of leadership by himself. With Gilethra by his side, and the rest of the crew behind him, he had the support he needed to lead them all to safety. The Aether's path had been in deep space for weeks now. With every passing day, Cole and Gilethra worked hard to keep the ship running smoothly, but it was clear to both of them that they were in uncharted territory. They had faced several challenges, but there was always the lingering sense that something bigger was out there, waiting for them. As the crew gathered in the mess hall for a rare break, Captain Cole sat down with his coffee, his thoughts drifting. The storm had passed, the ship was in better shape, and for now, everything seemed calm. But there was an uneasy feeling in the air. He couldn't shake the sense that something was coming. Gilethra sat across from him, her sharp eyes studying the crew as they talked among themselves. Her expression was thoughtful, a slight frown on her face as she poked at her meal. It was clear she was thinking about the same things as Cole. "We're approaching the outer edge of the Valen Nebula," she said, breaking the silence. "There are unknown phenomena there. We don't know what kind of disturbances we might encounter." Cole looked up, his interest piqued. "You think it's dangerous?" Gilethra nodded slowly. "There's a high concentration of ionized particles in the nebula. It could interfere with our communications, navigation, and possibly even the ship's systems. If we're not careful, we might run into some serious trouble." Cole leaned back in his seat, staring at the table. It was exactly the kind of risk he had been worried about. They were so close to their destination, yet they were about to enter an area filled with unpredictable dangers. The last thing they needed was another crisis. "All right," Cole said after a pause, setting his coffee down. "We'll need to prepare the crew, make sure everyone knows what to do if something goes wrong." Gilethra nodded in agreement. "I'll run some simulations to prepare for the potential risks, but we'll need to be ready for anything. The nebula's effects could be sudden and violent." Cole's mind raced as he thought about the best way to prepare the ship. He had been through many challenges before, but this felt different. The Aether's path had been through its fair share of repairs, but the unknown dangers of deep space were always unpredictable. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the crew was starting to rely on him more than ever before. The pressure was growing, and he could feel it. The next few hours were spent preparing for the unknown. Gilethra worked with the engineering team to make adjustments to the ship's systems, while Cole coordinated with the rest of the crew. Everyone was tense, but they worked efficiently. They had learned to trust each other over the past few weeks, and that trust was going to be put to the test in the coming days. As they approached the nebula, Cole stood in the command center, staring out at the vast expanse of space ahead. The stars seemed distant, cold, and endless. The Aether's path was tiny in comparison, a fragile ship surrounded by the unknown. Silithra joined him, standing silently at his side. She didn't need to speak. The tension between them was palpable. The ship was moving slowly now, carefully navigating through the dense ionized gas of the nebula. The sensors flickered as the particles began to interfere with the ship's systems. Cole could feel the unease spreading through the crew. "We're entering the nebula," Cole said quietly. "This is where things get tricky." Silithra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "I'll make sure the shields are reinforced. We need to keep the ship intact." "Do whatever you need to do," Cole replied, his voice steady but firm. "We're counting on you." For the next few hours, they navigated through the swirling mass of gas and particles. The ship groaned as the ionized clouds hit its shields, the energy fluctuating as they fought to keep the systems running smoothly. Silithra worked tirelessly in engineering, rerouting power to reinforce the shields and stabilize the ship's core. As the ship moved deeper into the nebula, the disturbance became stronger. The sensors flickered more frequently, and the communication system began to fail. It was becoming harder to navigate. The crew's confidence was slowly replaced by a growing sense of tension. Everyone knew they were at the mercy of the unknown. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the ship. The lights flickered and then went out, plunging the command center into darkness. "What the hell was that?" Cole shouted, his voice sharp with alarm. Silithra's voice was calm but urgent. "The ion storm has overloaded the power conduits. We've lost several systems." Cole's heart raced as he processed the information. "We need to restore power, now." "Silithra, get the shields back online." She didn't hesitate. "I'm on it." "Captain, you need to reroute power from auxiliary systems to the core. We'll need the extra energy to stabilize the shields." Cole nodded, already moving toward the control panel. He could feel the pressure building as the seconds ticked by. They were in a vulnerable position, and every decision had to be perfect. One wrong move could spell disaster for the crew. Together, they worked quickly, rerouting power and repairing the damaged systems. The tension in the air was thick, but they didn't let it slow them down. Silithra was focused, her sharp eyes scanning the displays as she worked to restore the ship's defenses. After what felt like an eternity, the lights flickered back on. The shields hummed back to life, and the ship's systems slowly began to stabilize. The worst of the storm had passed, but there were still signs of interference. Cole let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. That was too close. Silithra nodded, her face pale but composed. "We've made it through for now, but we'll need to stay vigilant. There could be more disturbances ahead." Cole looked at her, gratitude in his eyes. "We make a good team, Silithra." She gave him a small nod, her golden eyes meeting his with quiet understanding. "Yes, Captain, we do." As the Aether's path continued its journey through the nebula, both Cole and Silithra knew that there were more dangers ahead. But whatever came next, they would face it together, prepared, determined, and stronger than before. The Aether's path was almost through the Valen Nebula. Despite the disturbances and the dangers they had faced, the crew had managed to stay on course. Captain Cole and Silithra had grown used to the challenges of deep space travel, but they knew the real test was yet to come. Ahead of them was the unknown, an uncharted system that had never been explored by humans before. The tension in the air was palpable. The crew had worked tirelessly, and although the worst of the nebula's storm had passed, everyone could feel that something was on the horizon. The quiet hum of the ship's engines seemed louder than usual, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. Cole stood in the command center, staring out at the vastness of space. The stars were distant pinpricks of light, scattered across the endless void. The Aether's path felt small, fragile, and yet it had carried them this far. His hand rested on the console in front of him, fingers lightly brushing over the controls. Silithra entered quietly, her usual calm demeanor barely concealing the worry that had crept into her features. She walked up to Cole, stopping beside him. "We've done well," she said, her voice steady but soft. "The ship is holding together, but we can't relax yet. There are still unknowns ahead." Cole nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars ahead. "I know. I can feel it too." Zelithra studied him for a moment, her golden eyes thoughtful. "You've been carrying the weight of this journey alone, Captain. But you don't have to anymore. We're all in this together. You've led us well so far." Cole turned to face her, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always thought of himself as the leader, the one who had to keep everyone together. But over the course of their journey, he had come to realize something important. Leadership wasn't about doing everything alone. It was about knowing when to ask for help, knowing when to trust those around you. "We've all worked hard," Cole replied, his voice a little softer than usual. "And I couldn't have done it without you. You've been more than just an engineer. You've been a partner. We're in this together, Zelithra." Zelithra gave him a small but genuine smile. "We make a good team." As they continued to watch the stars, a soft beep came from the control panel. Cole turned to see a new set of readings flashing across the screen. They were approaching the edge of the unknown system. The excitement and anxiety were evident in his eyes as he studied the data. "Here it is," Cole said, his voice filled with a quiet determination. "We're almost there." Zelithra stepped forward, tapping a few buttons to get a better read on the system. "The system's entry point is just ahead, but there are fluctuations in the gravitational field. If we're not careful, the ship could be pulled off course." Cole's brow furrowed. "How much time do we have?" "Not much," Zelithra replied. "We'll need to make some adjustments to the navigation systems. I'll need your help with the calculations." "Let's do it," Cole said firmly, already moving toward the console. Together, they worked quickly. Zelithra input the necessary data into the system, while Cole made adjustments to the ship's trajectory. The whole crew had to be alert now. The next few moments would decide whether they could navigate the dangers of the system and reach their destination safely. With a final adjustment, Cole hit the confirmation button, and the ship shifted slightly, altering its course just enough to avoid the gravitational fluctuations. "We did it," Cole said, a hint of relief in his voice. Zelithra nodded, though she remained focused. "We've only just entered the system. We need to keep our guard up." The Aether's path glided smoothly through the system, and for a moment, it felt as though the ship had found its rhythm. The crew worked in perfect harmony, with Zelithra overseeing the ship's systems and Cole directing the crew. Together, they had weathered countless storms, both literal and metaphorical. And now, they were about to discover something new, something that could change everything. As the ship continued to move forward, the sensors began to detect something strange ahead. An enormous energy field, pulsing with power. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The field surrounded what appeared to be a planet, a dark world that seemed to draw energy from the very stars around it. "Is that a planet?" Cole asked, his voice filled with awe. Zelithra's eyes widened as she examined the readings. "I've never seen anything like it. The energy signature is off the charts. It could be a new type of celestial body, something we don't fully understand." Cole took a deep breath, his mind racing. This was the moment they had been preparing for. This planet, this mysterious energy field, it was the unknown they had been searching for. "We've come this far," he said, turning to Zelithra. "Let's see what's waiting for us." Zelithra gave a short nod, a faint smile on her face. "Whatever it is, Captain, we'll face it together." The Aether's path continued its journey toward the mysterious planet, and as they approached, both Cole and Zelithra knew that their journey was far from over. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and this was just the beginning. Together, they had proven that no challenge was too great, and no mystery too complex. With each other's support, there was nothing they couldn't overcome.